Somebody writes in, I hope they fly Amin in and give him time to deep dive into that firing because ESPN is reporting Doc Rivers is a top candidate, and I am so confused. That was a bit of a stunner yesterday. 43 games in to the season, the team with the third best record in basketball has fired Adrian Griffin, who has gone through so many interviews to get that job, and he's done after 43 games. Amin, explain to me what happened here.
He lost the locker room. That's the quick and easy answer. In the NBA, it doesn't matter if your X's and O's are beyond reproach. It doesn't matter if you've got the best lineup data in the world. It doesn't matter if you've got a great relationship with your general manager, with ownership. If you lose the locker room, there's no coming back from that. They don't say, you know what, you lost us, but you got us back
But
later.
why did he lose them? How did he lose them? And how is Doc Rivers in play? How many good jobs are we going to give Doc Rivers to fail at?
So the Doc Rivers part, we need to set that aside. If you want to talk about why Adrian Griffin lost his job, we could talk about that. And then Doc Rivers is a completely different topic. But in one answer, I'll say Adrian Griffin, it was a bunch of small fissures over a long time, right? So it starts with, Chris Haynes brought this up yesterday on TNT. When he was hired, you got to remember what the Bucks were. It was, Giannis might leave. We don't know. He won't sign an extension. He had that interview where he said, if we don't do stuff, I'm leaving, right? Chris Middleton's a free agent. Damian Lillard isn't even a glint in John Horst's eye, right? And the team had an embarrassing ouster in the first round. So there was a feeling of this might be a time of transition for this team. And Adrian Griffin was a guy, like you said, had interviewed 14 times and had been assistant coach for a long time in this league and played in this league. And so this was kind of, all right, bring in some new blood, particularly because Bud had worn out his welcome and his stay with that locker room, and particularly probably with Giannis, right? So we get to training camp, and the first thing that happens is, now this happens with every new coach. It's your first time coaching, guess what we're going to have next to you? An old head who's done it before, been there, done that.
Somebody who looks like Greg Cody.
Somebody who looks like Greg Cody.
A bench coach that you need to steady things because you're a new coach and you just need on the sideline somebody in a suit who looks like Greg Cody.
Someone on the, preferably with less embalming fluid. I don't know what's going on with your makeup.
You do look a little. You look a little embalmed.
Ready for the
Jessica, Charlotte, Chris Cody. Can you give me an appraisal of the hue of Greg Cody?
Wow.
Bronzed and matte.
Okay, whatever that means.
Matt Patricia.
Why are you putting people on the spot?
Well, I don't think he looks that bad, guys.
Thank you.
Okay.
You're that bad, Charlotte. That was
I
so
think
kind
Greg
of
looks
you.
amazing. I always think Greg looks amazing.
You say fissures over a long period of time. I mean, but 43 games is not a long period of time. I don't have, you tell me, because I haven't read everything about what precedent is here. This is a fairly shocking thing to happen this fast with a team that is otherwise, they might be underachieving, but they're still obviously very good, and we were assuming they would need time to figure it out.
David Blatt got fired 41 games into having the best record in the East and having come off a finals appearance.
But made a fool of himself. Made a fool of himself.
Some might argue
publicly.
Some might argue that almost losing to Detroit is making a fool of yourself. Some might argue that what got David Blatt fired was not the fighter pilot's quote or anything. It was he lost his locker room.
He was drawing up plays not for LeBron James at the end of games. He had LeBron James inbounding the ball.
But Dan, that's not what got him done in specifically. It's not like management said, you did what? Get out of here. You're fired. It's he lost his locker room. Adrian Griffin lost his locker room. We don't have specifics of the plays that he drew up that were dumb or the schemes that he came up with or didn't come up with. We don't have those specifics right now. All we know is he lost the locker room, and most importantly, he lost the one guy you can't lose in the locker room, Giannis Antetokounmpo.
What do you make of the Terry Stotts reports? It looked like the veteran coaching presence that was on the bench was Terry Stotts, and he and Griff were at odds with one another.
So the reporting around it made it seem like this was a case of everyone had culpability. Terry Stotts was operating with a level of freedom and autonomy that isn't typical of an assistant coach. Adrian Griffin was perhaps incredibly reactive to do a public undressing, and I say public, I mean in front of the team, of Stotts in that situation. They both probably handle it poorly, but the reality is that's why you have a guy like Terry Stotts on the staff, to help someone who's never done this before, no matter how long you've done it as an assistant coach. There's a management of people that happens as a head coach that needs to occur, particularly when you're putting in things that are new to the team.
Didn't you tell us the story in Phoenix of a Shaq Phoenix team that fell apart in practice because you saw the revolt in practice? They weren't respecting their coach. They didn't want to run the offense the way he wanted it run.
And it wasn't in practice. It was training camp. That's why I say when you know, you know. I've seen it with my own eyes. We were, I think, 28-22 or something like that. We were a playoff team. We were like in the mix. It wasn't falling apart, but we all knew they're not following that guy anymore. So we can sit here and live for another 30, 40 games and then get bounced in the first round and say, well, that didn't work out. Or we can do something about it right now.
So you think it's a good move then, just based on once you lose the locker room, anyone's got to be fired,
yes.
period.
Yeah, I believe that when you lose the locker room, particularly when you lose your superstar, more than anything, it's done. It doesn't come back from that.
Based on what you've said, it makes me wonder, does the team now say to Giannis, we're thinking of Doc Rivers. Is that okay with you? Are you good with Doc Rivers?
Well, before we bring up Doc Rivers, okay, because people in the NBA know this. I don't know how willing Amin is to speak to this part of it. Doc has charmed his way into an assortment of wonderful situations.
Wait up, Dan Le Batard. Wait, hold on. That's not my fault. It's not my fault.
That you're charming?
That I'm charming? That's a beautiful question, by the way. Very handsome question, but that's not my fault. I'm a nice guy.
A lot of people don't trust Doc Rivers'
Mike's
charm
fault.
because he figures out ways to get in good positions that serve Doc Rivers. The reporting on this one was weird, though. Mike, can you explain to me what this?
Ooh, what an offense.
what the CNN arm of basketball is that would report Doc Rivers as a top candidate?
I'm fascinated by the reporting surrounding the replacement for Adrian Griffin. First, that Woj gets beat on a Doc Rivers rumor was pretty wild.
That was kind of wild. I mean, I texted him. I said, hey, Adrian, it's happening.
And then Woj quickly follows up that report with confirmation. But last night on the NBA on TNT, a Turner broadcast, they break the news to their viewing audience that CNN is reporting that Doc Rivers is the next coach of the Milwaukee Bucks.
I didn't know they did sports.
Didn't know, especially with Rachel not there anymore. Like, I had no idea that they were breaking stories. This is the flagship broadcast for Turner Sports, but the lead NBA insider, Chris Haynes, is not agreeing with this report. He's saying that they're talking, it's headed in that direction, but no deal is in place. So if you go to the story from CNN, it's this amorphous CNN staff. It's not a single reporter. So you have this weird situation where Turner's arm is not confirming this report. Shams and Woj are not confirming this report. CNN is reputable, but we can't ignore the fact that they're not breaking these types of stories.
They're reputable. Some people might.
Discovery Channel. They mess it all up.
Some people might argue that they're not credible. There are a whole lot of people in America who would say they're not credible.
Yeah, but when it comes to basketball, I do think that there is a warranted skepticism because they don't break reports.
Well, that and also, like, your actual basketball part of your company is not saying yes. That's the big one, right? It would be like if ABC News reported I'm leaving, but ESPN said, well, hold the brakes.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of weird.
That part to me is the strangest because they're the same corp. Mm-hmm. They got to get on the same page here.
Hold the brakes is holding the horses and tapping the brakes. What did you want to do there with hold the brakes?
Did I say hold the brakes? Well, I didn't say it. Doc Rivers said it.
Yeah.
And that's what makes him so damn charming, Dan. He makes little idiosyncratic mistakes that makes him more
Is it his
believable.
job?
Are you alluding to Doc Rivers potentially doing something like behind the scenes while Griffin is in place? Because what you said is like, oh, Doc Rivers likes to finesse situations in order to be in the best possible situation for Doc Rivers. That doesn't seem that bad.
He was advising Adrian Griffin, wasn't he?
That's the interesting part
He
about
was
this, Charlotte.
advising Adrian Griffin while Adrian Griffin was having trouble keeping the locker room. Also, a big part of this is that the Bucks defense completely cratered. They went from being a top 5 defense to being, as of yesterday morning, at ranked 22. And they were doing things that were inexplicable. And Giannis was like, why are we just letting anybody can shoot threes, anybody can go to the rim against us, have at it. And he said that publicly, which, sure, you can say there are other fissures, but like once you're star, I also heard he lost Thanasis, which,
Dude, let me tell you something. A vet coach would have made sure Thanasis is happy.
All of this is weird enough. That I'm not suggesting that Doc Rivers did anything wrong here. I'm just saying it's suspicious enough that a lot of stuff here feels like it's got questions on it, because this is a super unusual thing to happen when they just got Damian Lillard. Like these are not flippant decisions. This must have been so obvious to them that they can't even get through half a season without realizing. Do you know how rare it is for a team to make an investment and immediately say to itself, "Wow, we got that one wrong"? Like usually they're stubborn about figuring out how to make themselves look smart because they don't want the public embarrassment of this.
But it's not
because this looks like you don't know what you're doing.
But Dan, this is the truism of the NBA is that we will tolerate almost everything, any sort of incompetence. What we won't tolerate is you losing your locker room, particularly your superstar. Because if you make the wrong decisions, we drew up the wrong play, we had the wrong defensive scheme. Like, we can live through that. We say he's a first-time coach, he'll figure it out. But when the guys in the locker room are like, F that guy, dude, it's over. It doesn't matter how good you are or how good you can be.
Looping in what you said at the beginning, which was establishing the timeline of the hire, and Dan just saying right now, it looks like they didn't know what they were doing. I think it's fair to say at the time of hiring him, they did not know what they were doing. They did not know which direction the team was going in. And had they acquired Damian Lillard before they made the decision on the head coach, it probably would have gone in a completely different direction.
Kevin O'Connor at The Ringer wrote that they were considering Nick Nurse, and a big part of the Adrian Griffin hire was that Giannis backed Griffin because he didn't want to play for Nick Nurse. So it seems like that if that's true, it was sort of like, Giannis wants a different guy, and here's the different guy, so let's go with him.
If the end game is Lillard on the Heat, things are going perfect, folks. Things are going
Curse
perfect.
of the Dame trade.
I mean, what's his name? Doc Rivers isn't a guy that's going to win you. I mean, I know he's won a title with the Celtics, but it's been bad.
A lot of Game 7 losses. No one has lost more Game 7s than that guy has. And when I bring up the fact that there are people in the NBA who don't trust how good he is at sales, and when you talk, about some of the stuff that poisons teams and the selfishness that is required to be eradicated when you're a team. You see what's happening with Halliburton, right? He rushes back because he's got incentives in his contract that give him $41 million if he's all NBA, and he gets hurt again. And when he gets hurt again, the Pacers' chances with that kind of selfishness get neutered because you've got money in play, self-interest in play. You've got so many egos in this locker room. The pressure is greatest on who in that locker room? It's Lillard, right? He's got to go there and make that work, right? Because Giannis has already won. So if they don't win with Lillard, he's the one who's got the most pressure on him. How do you lose Lillard in 43 games?
I don't know that he lost Lillard. He might have lost Lillard as part of a larger collection of people, the entire locker room. But again, if Giannis is like, nah, that's my guy, they're giving him every opportunity to turn it around.
I would argue the pressure's on the Bucks to keep Dame happy. And to keep Dame wanting to be here. And if Dame's out on Adrian, I actually see, you were saying that most of the time teams are too stubborn to admit they were wrong and they lose a season, and then they lose in the second round, and all of a sudden everyone's pissed. They're getting out ahead of it. They're like, this wasn't working, so we're going to rip the Band-Aid now and not waste an entire Dame year.
I tend to agree with Chris there in that the Doc Rivers hire is questionable and that we've already lamented the type of coach that he's been in the playoffs, but getting out ahead of it and trying to find a coach that can win your locker room back when Dame didn't want to be there to begin with. That is a part of this conversation is he didn't want to be there. And early on in the season, you heard comments from Giannis about team defense that were really interesting in those first 15, 20 games of the year, even as they were winning games, because you replaced Drew Holiday with Damian Lillard, who's not a good on-ball defender or team defender.